A really important and concerning exclusive from True North by Cosmo Georgia reveals that the Trudeau Liberal government has been considering a regulatory backstop when it comes to reductions of emissions from fertilizers if they don't get what they want through voluntary measures. What does this all mean and why does it matter? It sounds sort of technically convoluted, but basically, the Trudeau government has decided that emissions from fertilizers is one of the things that concerns them when it comes to their climate change agenda. They're bringing in a whole variety of legislation and rules, plastic bag bans, electric vehicle sales targets, you name it, obviously bringing up the carbon tax, creating the second carbon tax when it comes to the clean fuel standard, and now this, where they're looking at fertilizers used by farmers and saying, well, they create emissions, we want to reduce those emissions. So they've been proposing what they call a 30% reduction in the emissions from those fertilizers. They say they're not proposing a 30% reduction in use of fertilizers, just in the emissions that come from them. How you separate those two, though, a lot of people say technically is something that still has yet to be answered. So they're basically proposing a reduction in fertilizer usage, but it's going to be voluntary. Okay, I guess that's okay then, and they're going to leave it up to farmers to decide whether or not they proceed with it. But what's the point of the government even doing something if they say it's voluntary? Here's where these documents, internal government documents that True North has acquired via access to information, come into play, finding that during this discussion, government officials did discuss bringing in a regulatory backstop to basically make this mandatory. Now, that phrase regulatory backstop, that's actually the same phrase that they used when it came to the carbon tax. So they told provinces, look, there's going to be no national carbon tax, just so long as you guys introduce a provincial carbon tax that we're satisfied with. And of course, it didn't turn out that way, and a couple provinces went to the courts to fight it. They lost, and now we have a national carbon tax in effect in places like Ontario. Why does this fertilizer story pose a problem? Why should Canadians be concerned about it? Well, because a number of industry groups and farmers have said, look, if you basically reduce fertilizer usage by 30%, it means you're reducing our yields by 30%, because fertilizers are what's allowing us to basically live in this modern society with the degree of food production that we currently have. You reduce the yields. What does that mean? It basically means you reduce the volume of food, which means we're making less food and we need the food that we produce. And we're also going to see food prices increase at a time when, as all Canadians know, they've already increased quite a deal. So where do we go from here? Well, the Liberal government maintains that the proposal is for this to be voluntary, but the documents show that they have acknowledged maybe we'll have to make it mandatory. We'll see where the government proceeds with this, but farmers not happy. I know industry is hoping that they can resolve this through back-channel conversations and through negotiating with government, but we've seen in other places around the world, like in the Netherlands, there have been protests that verge on riots because farmers are so frustrated with heavy-handed impositions. What's going to happen next here? Who knows, but hopefully for those concerned about what this means for the food supply chain, we don't see any sort of mandatory backstop come into play.